Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lisa Tarango. I'm the Chief of Police for the Pecos Police Department. I work here with the town of Pecos City. I welcome each and every one of you for coming. Thank you for being here. A little scenario and synopsis about the case that we've been working. On June 28th, 2019, I was contacted by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. At that time, they had explained to me that we had a Jane Doe case that had happened here in Reeves County, July the 5th of 1966. At the time, being a newly appointed chief, I was unaware of the Jane Doe case, had to do a little research on my own to try to figure out if there were any details, any case file, or any evidence that pertained to this particular investigation. Upon speaking with the NECMEC personnel, Ashley Rodriguez, she had explained to me that the National Center for Unidentified Persons Systems had notified them of our Jane Doe case in 2015, with the concern that at that time of her missing, she may have been a juvenile or under the age of 18. Within a few minutes, Ashley Rodriguez of NECMEC was able to provide me at least with a newspaper clipping, a little bit of information about our Jane Doe. From there, I did some research locally and found that July 5th, 1966, there had been a young lady and gentleman that had checked into the local Roper's Motel here in Pecos, looking to be a newly married couple. The two had checked in under the name Mr. and Miss Russell Batten. Upon looking at the article, it looked like the female Jane Doe had been at the swimming pool area and her male companion had been inside the hotel room. There were reports in newspaper articles that they had heard a scream. One of the workers had run out and found a young female in the swimming pool. She was pulled out of the swimming pool and life-saving efforts were given. She was eventually picked up by the ambulance and taken to a hospital. The companion went to the front desk area and asked for the registration card, which is how they did hotel registration at the time. He explained that that was the only form of identification he was going to have at the hospital. Her male companion never showed up at the hospital, and he had gathered his belongings and left the hotel completely. There's a lot of mixed reports of different descriptions that came out in newspaper articles. We began a local research on Jane Doe 1966, and as you can imagine, the records are over 50 years old. People have changed, law enforcement, some of which are not even surviving anymore. There was no one or nothing that we could do to find any real information or evidence pertaining to this case. The last ditch effort was we contacted our local funeral home, and we were able to speak with an employee there who was an employee in 1966, the day this event happened. I call it, God's will or good luck or whatever you want to call it, but he recalled that in the garage of the funeral home they had archived or vintage records that we would be allowed to look at. We went out to the garage and we found a folder that said Unknown X Girl, 1966. That's the only information we had when we started this investigation. We were able to get a death certificate. As you can imagine, had very limited information. The date and time, the location, the description of a female. Unknown X Girl is what her name is and was at this point. Inside the folder, aside from the death certificate, we found a funeral arrangement packet. We found information of people who had written in letters concerned that this could be their missing child. We also found a registry where people had donated money because our community in Pecos did not want her to just go unknown with just a pauper's grave and just left as the unknown forever. So she was given a proper burial. She was given a proper coffin. And she forever became the Unknown Drowned Girl 1966 in our own Fairview Cemetery, where she's been since July 22nd of 1966, when a proper funeral was held for her. Once we did find out that little bit of information, we reached out once again to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and collaboratively we agreed that maybe we could do some sort of facial reconstruction. Nobody knew that in this funeral home packet that there was also a couple of Polaroid pictures, 50-year-old Polaroid pictures, so not very good quality. A drawing was put together. Yes, it looked like the girl that we saw in the Polaroid pictures, but there was a lot of missing information, or missing observation, if you will. So we just had a picture that we worked off of. The media did come. We did do more media releases just to try to find out more information. Not much was coming of that. So I assigned an officer, Corporal Felix Salcido, to the case. And at that point, it kind of took a different direction. We reached out to the University of North Texas, who have anthropologists assigned to the missing and unidentified. We reached out to a local judge, Judge Roger Harrison. He was able to guide us through obtaining an exhumation order. In other words, an ability to exhume the body and move forward with some testing. The resources provided to us through NECMEC were the ability to have the body exhumed and then have it sent to the University of North Texas, where we did do a skeletal reconstruction, as well as DNA testing for CODIS. At that point, coronavirus hit, everything came to a standstill. In March of 2020, nothing was happening with this case. The lab people were obviously working remotely and at home and weren't in the laboratories. July of 2020, we received the skeletal reconstruction and had been advised by the lab that DNA had been uploaded in CODIS, which is the combined, indexing database for DNA. During the time that we had that submitted, we were contacted by Othram Labs out of the Woodlands to offer their service and explanation of really what their services were. From there, we sent what we needed to evidence-wise to Othram Labs. They were able to do some genetic typing and testing, and at that point, NECMEC again reached out, offered their services to allow us the ability to forward this case on to genealogy. From there, the information was sent to genealogy, where we have innovative forensic labs. After Innovative took over, the genetic side of this, or the genealogy testing, which is an amazing process, and I will let these folks explain a little bit about this. And understandably, this is still a very open, active investigation. Once it was submitted to Innovative Forensics, not only was the genealogy work done, but there's also some amazing investigative work that was done. Once we got a little further in, a little more information started coming out of possibility of potential candidates that could be related to our Jane Doe. We reached out to Department of Florida. They, in turn, connected us with a cold case unit in a particular town with somebody who was a very viable candidate as a family member to our Jane Doe. You don't want to give anybody a lot of false hope, so we just kind of generically wanted to, see if there was any history behind missing family member, because this particular person had already posted some stuff through social media about having a missing family member over 50 years. So some of this stuff was starting to line up a little bit. This particular lady in Florida, she was willing to submit some DNA swabs, which is just a cheek swab. From there, the cheek swabs were submitted back to us as evidence, and we submitted it to Gene by Gene, which is a lab in the Houston area that helped us with the genealogy side. At that point, we, of course, time is of value to us lately. You know, we've waited 50 years, but what's a few more weeks or months? We continue to be just kind of as patient as we can. In the meantime, myself learning a little bit about genealogy. I had no idea the process or the investigative efforts that go into a case like this, especially a almost 55-year-old case. Last week, myself and Corporal Felix Salcido traveled to Kansas, where we met with the possible family of our Jane Doe, with a little bit of information in hand that the evidence provided to us from Innovative Forensics, Authorum Labs, Gene by Gene, University of North Texas, led us to our Jane Doe being identified as Jolene Hemme. Jolene Hemme was 17 years of age the day she was here in our community in Pecos. And talking to the family last week was like talking to them 50 years ago. The emotion was just as raw and just as solid of their missing family member. So as you can see, the picture up front is a picture that the family had. It's a yearbook picture. Picture quality is not as good 50 years ago as it is today, obviously. Being that it is still an open, active investigation, we've learned a lot more from the family and from each of these folks through their efforts. And so obviously it is going to continue to be an open, active investigation. We're still looking to find out who the person was that was with her that day. What information do they have? What can they provide our community? So I'd like to introduce, you can see standing here, Innovative Forensics. This is Ryan Bachman, Jennifer Moore, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Luis Vasquez, Jen Spears, she's out of the Florida area, Seminole County Sheriff's Department, and then Madison is the caseworker for Innovative Forensics. So in other words, she's the one that really keeps things kind of in line for them, I think, on the casework side. We have Michael Vogen with Authorum Labs and Dr. David Middleman with Authorum Labs as well. So with that being said, we are very pleased after 55 years to be able to identify our Jane Doe as Jolene Hemme of Salina, Kansas. I appreciate you all coming. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to field what I can.
From Seminole to Salina, Kansas, the tie-in on that is that there's a person from Kansas who had moved to Florida, as far as the connection there.
A family member, yes sir,
Okay.
had moved to Florida. The majority of this family does still reside in Kansas.
And I guess you said that you don't have a suspect right now. Does the family know if she had been seeing anyone or had any kind of relationship before she left Kansas?
So obviously that's still part of the open investigation. The family was not able to give us an exact person or, relationship she may be having at that time. Of course, the young man that she was described to have been with here in Pecos that day, we're still extremely interested to know any of that information. So if anyone, as far as friends, other family members, co-workers in Kansas, had any idea of anyone of that nature, we're very interested in who that person may be. The only information we have is the descriptions that have been given that we've read in newspaper articles.
Do you have the proper spelling of her name?
I do. Capital Jolaine. Last name Hemme, Hemmy.
Do you think it was, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think this would have been possible without the technology that we have right now, it's really advanced. Do you think this played an important role in resolving or finding who she was?
It absolutely played a huge role in finding out at least the identity of who she is. And I think if more people in this type of situation with lost family members or identified persons get involved in cases like this and cooperate and submit DNA, I think there would be a huge resolution of missing and unidentified persons throughout the nation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I know you said obviously this investigation is active and ongoing. Is there any suspicion of foul play in this case, or maybe just a freak accident?
Without being there 55 years ago, it's really wide open. We're not going to rule that out, but at least we would like to know who the gentleman was and why did he leave? Why didn't he at least say, here's her name? At least tell somebody who she was.
You said the man had asked for his identification at the office of the motel.
He had asked for the registration card,
Okay.
and that's all that he said he had as identification.
And he had mentioned that he was going to the hospital after that?
That's the way he made the people at the time believe, just based on the newspaper articles that we read.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Was there ever an autopsy conducted?
According to the death certificate that we were able to find, it does show that an autopsy was conducted.
Did you ever find the records on that?
We did not.
Did that autopsy indicate the cause of death as drowning? Obviously, it is indicated on her death, but...
The only thing that we have that shows that is just the death certificate that shows drowning. We were not able to secure a copy of the autopsy. So briefly, I'm going to have Brian with Innovative Forensics discuss a little bit, and then I'll have Dr. Middleman as well discuss a little bit about their part in all of this investigation.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Bachman. I'm the Media Relations for Innovative Forensic, a Virginia-based investigative genetic genealogy company, and part of this amazing team that was able to identify Jolene Heming. So, first and foremost, I think it's really important to acknowledge Jolene and her family. The anguish of not knowing where Jolene had been for 54 plus years is not lost on us. We stand here today having accomplished the sole purpose of Innovative Forensic, which is providing answers to families. A special thank you to all that assisted in this investigation and subsequent identification of Jolene, obviously including but not limited to Chief and the Pecos Police Department, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Gene by Gene, and Othram Labs. Innovative Forensic used state-of-the-art genealogy tools to assist in identifying Jolene. The initial upload of her genetic profile to law enforcement-friendly databases, including specifically FTDNA and GEDmatch, allowed genealogy research that would eventually lead to her identification. This would not be possible without members of the public uploading their genetic profile to these public databases that are law enforcement friendly. Appreciation for all those involved in Jolene's identification cannot be overemphasized. In a current world of 24/7 news, the identity of a young woman found in a motel pool in 1966 could have easily been overlooked or dismissed. The fact that that case was not overlooked here is a testament to the individuals and agencies that participated in this investigation. And Innovative Forensic is proud to be a part of that group. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dr. David Middleman, CEO at Othram, and it was a very exciting outcome today to be able to share something as positive as an identification of someone that has essentially been lost to time over the last 55 years. So a couple things that I thought were really meaningful out of this case. This case is 55 years old. You heard from the chief that the body was only exhumed in 2019, so it had been buried and left for decades, over 50 years. And in spite of that, someone had asked earlier, is technology what's allowing these breakthroughs? In spite of that, we were able to build a really great genetic profile, and these genetic profiles facilitate these kind of searches that you hear about, genealogical or otherwise, and allow you to reconnect bodies to identities, and then eventually reconnect identities back to families. So I think one really important thing to note is that it's just incredible what is possible, even with the oldest cases. And there are probably lots of other cases that may have already been explored and perhaps discarded because the evidence was too old, perhaps it was not suitable for testing at the time. But just in the last couple of years, there's been tremendous innovation in what can be done with even the most scant quantity of DNA or evidence. And so just so everyone knows, so many more cases can be worked. And I'd like to echo what Ryan said about the public support, because when we started this case, you heard from the chief about NCMEC and Pecos working together to exhume the body. That's a very costly and time-consuming process. When it came time to do the testing and these kind of downstream activities to bring the name back to the person, there wasn't a lot of resources left. And so I want to highlight Michael Vogen, who's in the audience today, but this was one of the first cases that he had worked on with NCMEC, and we launched a crowdfund on DNA Solves to help cover the funding necessary to start this project. And that's one of the many ways the public can help, even just helping a little bit on a crowdfund to help push testing along, to share the stories. There are countless stories that get solved either partially or even in full because someone sees something and remembers something. Keeping the case alive is important. The case is alive for the people that were the direct relatives and the families of the victim, but the rest of the world, so to speak, moves on. And so being able to keep these stories alive in the media, in podcasts and true crime shows, just anywhere on the internet, helps keep the message alive in case someone might know something. And the third, which was the point that Ryan brought up, is yeah, absolutely. There are opportunities for folks who have tested with consumer companies, and you never know, you may be a very distant relative. Not the kind of relative you have over Thanksgiving, but we're all genetic relatives. So a very distant genetic relative that very might well be the stepping stone to restoring someone's identity. And again, as the world's moved on and we've moved into other things, I think it was really impactful what the chief said about Jolene's family. They still remembered, and they were still looking for her. They were looking for her when she first disappeared. They were looking for her all this time since. I don't know if you had mentioned it here, but you'd also remarked that the chief had also remarked that one of the sisters was a very active promoter of NCMEC cases, and not surprisingly, due to the disappearance of her own sister, was very, very much into advocacy for kids that go missing, and so it shared a lot of NCMEC stories. So that story remained alive and very, very, very contemporary for the family that was affected. So not only do we have technology to bring a positive outcome to these cases, but we have people that are still waiting. Even if we are not necessarily waiting, these folks are waiting decades, and it's very very common in all these cases. So obviously grateful for the opportunity to work with all of you. We love NCMEC, appreciate you letting us get involved, Chief, and so thanks to everyone.
So again, lastly, we want to thank the Hemi family. She's one of 15 children, 9 of which are still surviving. I also want to give Luis Vasquez a few minutes just to explain what National Center for Missing and Exploited Children does and how they helped in this investigation as well.
Good
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chief, for the invitation. My name is Luis Vasquez. I am the Team Man Coordinator for NCMEC, for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I'm a retired FBI agent, and my role in this, and the role of NCMEC, the National Center, is to facilitate and help with these type of investigations. Investigation like this relies a lot on technology, which is ever-changing. There is a lot of things that come up from day to day, new technology, new methods to investigate. But most importantly, in cases like this, what I find is very beneficial, and just as important, is the teamwork that comes with working these investigations. And this is a perfect example, what you see here, of teamwork, of what can be accomplished when people get together and decide to work on something, a case that's 54 years old. 54 years old, that's a long time. And so many times we tend to think, well, what can we do? I mean, there's a lot that can be done, and a lot can be done not only on the investigative side, but also from the public getting involved in these type of cases. So what we as NCMEC, we are go-between sometimes. We come in and whatever we can do to facilitate, to help, we'll get out there and we'll work with you. So on behalf of the National Center, and again, Chief and Innovative, and thank you everybody for the invitation, and look forward to more results on this, positive things that will come of this, and other cases in the future. And thanks again.
I thank you all for coming, telling Jolene's story, and it's not over with yet, obviously. Have a nice day.